So with our rust stalkers here, the armor is the head plate and these little body plates. So we're going to airbrush those white and do our Blood Angel red contrast over these areas. There's a lot of hand painting with these guys. They're pretty spindly and have a lot of little electronic parts and accents. But we still want to maintain that airbrush look for our Mars AdMech, especially with the red, so it matches the rest of the army. After you're done with your white airbrush, this is kind of the look you're going for. Very, very bright white on the front of the helm, leaving a fade to gray on the back. And then the underplates, if you shoot your airbrush from this angle on the chest, you'll get those hard shadows underneath each plate. So when we put our contrast red on, we'll get a nice shadow under there to define each of these objects. Also went ahead and did the back because we can paint this as a plate as well. Again, keeping it a little bit darker than the front of the head here. So we're going to airbrush our contrast red on top of our white now. After you get done with your red, we're going to move on to the yellow. We're going to do a broad airbrush over our red just to make sure we richen up any areas that were left with a diluted looking white or pinkish color. This also helps to up the vibrance of our red. After you get your yellow on with the airbrush, it is time to do your black areas. All the cloth on these guys is black, so anything that you identify as cloth, sleeves, pants, some of the chest area, painted black, and then we'll do a controlled airbrush highlight on those areas, again, to save time. Once your black areas are locked in, here, the back around the back, any of these that look like cloth, we're going to take engine gray, airbrush a highlight on those black areas. This is what it should look like after you get your controlled airbrush highlights on. Make sure you hit the top area, shoulder, and did a little bit here on the inside of the pants just to catch these high folds. Pretty much left this area alone because it's a fairly dark section of the model. Next step is to take your silver RLM, air silver, or chrome, or aluminum, or any of those. They work because we're going to wash it. Hit all the metal areas. This is a long step. These are all the areas that should be painted silver on your model when you're done. Also, the backpack has been airbrushed with our Vallejo Metal Colors Chrome. We're going to apply a black wash to all of these areas now. So this is what your model should look like after you get your black wash on there. I noticed I hadn't painted the hand, so I went ahead and painted that and washed it as well. And then here's the backpack after it's been washed until not like super heavy, but heavy enough to where you're filling in all the cracks, and the chrome will get tinted down fairly well. Next, I'm going to move on and use my liquid gold for all my off-colored parts on this guy. I'll go in, look at some reference, find out which parts I want to be different colors, and the same thing on the backpack here. Gonna pick out some parts for that. Remember, when you're using your liquid gold, get you a synthetic brush. I like for these, it doesn't matter if the brush has body or not, as long as it's small it can hold a good point, because you're going to ruin your brush pretty quickly. And to clean up, we use isopropyl alcohol. So these are the parts that should be gold. We're going to add a Reichland flesh shade to it, and again, I just went online and looked at which parts they had designated as gold or brass. We're going to put the Reichland flesh shade over those before we do a dry brush. So this is what your gold should look like after you get your Reichland flesh shade wash on there. It's still drying, but after that is dry, I'm going to take the silver RLM and do a controlled dry brush with a smaller dry brush. So I have these kind of small, these are from Knights at the Game Table. These are nice little, like, tiny get in there sort of dry brushes, so when you have parts that are close to other colors like this gold sitting right in the middle of the red armor, want to get in there and dry brush that, I can. So this is what your brass should look like after you get your dry brush on there. Just making sure we hit the edges, get a little bit of highlight on our objects. Now we're going to take our Pro Acryl Coal Black and apply that to all the hoses and cabling that are on the figure. So once you get all your hoses painted black, and the little one's on the back of his leg, he has one run around his waist, over the shoulder, and these little breather hoses here. We're going to take a blue, a medium saturated blue. So this is a sample paint that I have laying around, kind of like a Space Wolves blue. Here it is here. We mix it with a little bit of black, get kind of a dark tone blue. We're going to do just a small highlight on our hoses. Go ahead and mix them up and show you. So you want it still fairly dark. I'll make sure I mix up enough paint here. And then for these hoses, I'm just going to do kind of a light brush stroke. Catch mostly the high points and let it trail off toward the end there. So I have a nice highlight on my hose. So once you get those highlights on your hoses, it is time to edge highlight our red. So I'm taking a mix of Kadar red highlight and Kadar red base. About a 50-50 mix. You can see a few examples here of previous work. And we're going to edge highlight all our red areas. Tips for edge highlighting: make sure you use a heavier body paint. You use the edge of the brush, not the tip of the brush. And you just pull along, gently tickle the figure. And try to avoid other parts. I want to get something like this shoulder pad. Just adjust. There's no rush. Highlight up. When you have shallow sort of bits leading in like these, you will have to use the tip of the brush, and that just takes practice. It's hard to do under the camera. There we go. I'm going to finish the rest of that up and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so once you get your red edge highlights on, I'm going to take a little bit of parafilm and we're going to mask off where the blade is. I'm not going to do any OSL on here. Do that afterwards if you want to, but we're going to do a 2-stage airbrushed power sword with a little bit of edge highlights after that to clean it up. Alright, I got them wrapped up. Now I can shoot my blade. So I've got a 50-50 solution of my Signar blue highlight in my airbrush, mixed with thinner. Do the hand test. And then I'm going to shoot from an extreme angle here just to hit this one side of the blade. And I'm going to let it layer on slowly. And so now I can change angles and hit the bottom side of the other side. Strengthen this side just a little bit. And there you go, power sword. So once you've peeled your masking, take a little bit of your Signar blue highlight, your ghost gray. We're going to do some progressive edge highlighting on this blade. So I like to start with the base color, just that way in the black areas we can make sure that our edges are defined. You can hit this little power lead here, and then on the other side here, make sure the camera's catching it, hit that edge. And then hit the middle edge, we're going to pull a line this way. And we'll just build up. What we'll do is progressive mixes. So I'll show you the next step. Mixing here on my palette so I can see my colors next to each other and how they're going to lay on the model, layer wise. Move up with our next stage of edge highlight. And I might put some streaks down here or do some hand layers just to make it look like it's got some some shine going on. I think this edge is fine enough that we can. It's a little bit messy, gonna need to clean it up, but we'll get that done and be back. So here you can see the progressive edge highlights. Really easy to illustrate here, where you see the dark blue, mixed blue, almost light, and then the ghost gray. So that's representative of the Signar highlight. Our mix here, and then a pure highlight. Kind of the same thing here with these little streaks, just pulling lines and then building them up to the brighter color toward the edge of the blade and making them more dense toward the tip, so you get kind of that radiating shine. And then here, just a little bit of dots for your power coil going onto the sword. And I think it makes for a nice looking contrasty sword. From here, we're going to move on to the lenses, so any of your little blue bits that need to be painted, we're going to address those. So I just got a few little lenses on this guy. Base color of our Signar highlight, and then 50-50 mix, do our little crescent moons for our lenses, and then a white dot in the upper right hand corner. These guys, these really tiny ones, I just did a little bit of the mixed Signar highlight with the ghost gray, just to give the illusion of a lens in there, because they're so tiny it'll get messy try to put too much. So we're to the point where we can glue some of these pieces together. We just got to dry brush the base. So I want to show you how I attached this backpack to this wire. I didn't even drill this. I stuffed like a little ball of sticky tack down in there and then just pushed the wire into it. And then from here, that gives me a little bit of cleanup to do around the outside of this edge, but now I have plastic here. So if I'm using a plastic glue or even a CA glue, I don't have to worry about the paint popping off. Over here, I'm going to use my X-Acto and kind of scratch the outside edge of this, just so I make sure that I'm making good contact. So for our bases, we're going to be dry brushing with the blue-gray pale. I don't know why it's named that way. I'm going to take the small one and sort of cover up around their feet, and then I'm going to move over to a larger dry brush to get the majority of it. I'm going to add some to my palette. Not add as much as last time. And then these little silver areas, we're going to dull that out. Any sort of overages from hitting things while we were painting, make sure we get in there. That way we don't get too much on the foot. It's okay to get a little bit on the foot, because he's going to have some of that dust get on his feet. Poke the brush down in there. Alright, so now we got around our feet, we can dry brush the rest of the area. Once you get that basing on there, we're going to take a little bit of white. Wipe off, and we're going to do the front of the base just to brighten up the front a little bit. This will bring interest to the front of the model, making the back look like it's in darkness. Now with this, you can always upgrade. You can add washes. We can put tufts on there. This is just for consistency's sake for the army that we're painting for. So I did talk to the client, and for the dune crawler, if you want to see how we can upgrade that kind of basing theme. I've added some dirt, debris, we got some razor wire in there, so, and a little bit more dense gray to, you know, simulate that the rubble kind of hit and splattered and knocked some stuff up. But that's where you can go with that basing if you want to. The last step is just to make sure that we add our black ring at the bottom. I know it already looks fairly black, but I want to make sure we have a nice clean presentation for the model. Everything being nice and neat and clean always feels better. And then we'll matte varnish once we get everything done, and this will be your finished mid-level rust stalker.